factoring, much like, I don't know, try and think of something that can annoy you at times, but it just doesn't go away, and it's like, oh my gosh, I got to deal with this, though. That's what factoring is to a lot of people. But with a few little tips and tricks, I think it can be livable. So to get ready for factoring, we need to understand how to FOIL or multiply out things first, because factoring is actually undoing FOIL. So if it's been a little while, I'm going to grab some different colors to do this in so it makes it a little bit easier to see. So FOIL is when we multiply the first terms. So 2x times x is 2x squared. Again, we got to add our exponents on our x's. Then we do the outer. 2x times negative 4, yes, signs matter, is negative 8x. We do our inner. 3 times x is 3x. And then we do our last. 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And if I've covered everything, it's like I get a little guy with a smiley face here. So it's kind of a way to be able to double check and make sure everything's going well. And of course, if we have like terms in the middle, we're going to combine those. So negative 8x plus 3x is negative 5x minus 12. And I've FOILed or multiplied that out. So what factoring is going to be is doing this backwards. We're going to take the multiplied out version, call it a trinomial with 3 parts, and we're going to create it back into 2 sets of parentheses. They're called factors. So sometimes, if you have the option, we're going to factor out a common monomial first. Little note here. We're going to always try this first, because if there is something in common and you don't take it out, number one, the numbers are going to be harder to deal with, and number two, you might not be able to get to the right answer at all. So when we're trying to find a common monomial, we're looking at 2 things. We're looking at a number in front, okay, a coefficient. So we'd be looking for the biggest number that divides into all the terms you have. And when I say all, I mean, like if we have 3 terms and you find a number, but it only divides into 2 of them, I can't do that. It's got to be able to divide into all of them. Or it might be, maybe, it might be a variable. And if it's a variable, man, all my pens are going out on me today. We're always going to be looking at the smallest exponent of the ones that I see. So you're like, ooh, this is already kind of interesting, because I want the smallest exponent, but I want the biggest number. Okay. So am I going to have both every time? No. If I only have one, maybe. So I look at this first pair. What do they have in common? They both have x. So I'm going to take an x out. I'm going to factor it out. And what that means is I'm just going to take one x away from each of these. So this would only be x, or x to the first, if you want to put an exponent. And if I take an x away from here, you're like, wait, if I take an x from there, there's none left. It's just 7. That's right. Because if I were now to distribute back out, x times x is x squared. X times 7 is 7x. That's all I'm doing, okay? So sometimes we're just looking for that common term. Okay, now this next one might not be as obvious. Anything going to 8 and 12? 2. Anything bigger? 4. So here's a couple of things you can do if you're not sure. So we always want to get the biggest number. If you grabbed, or in the future grab one of the multiplication charts, and you're like, okay, 8 and 12. You're going to look around and see, hey, can I find 8 and 12 in a column or row together? And just follow it up to the top. Now, I found it with 2, but ooh, I also found it here with 4, and 4 is bigger. So if doing that factor stuff is not your strength, the multiplication chart's a good way to be able to help out. So we're going to take out a 4. I can't take an x this time because both terms do not have an x. And so when this happens, I'm going to go, okay, so 8 divided by 4 is 2. Keep my x. 12 divided by 4 is 3. And again, if I want to check, I can just distribute quick. 4 times 2x is 8x. 4 times 3 is 12. I get my common factor out. Oh boy. The one that covers them all. 2x squared and 12x, what do those two have in common? There's 2 things. They both have an x. Anything number-wise? 2. So it can be both. So here, 2 divided by 2 is 1. I can put the 1 if I want to. I don't have to. 2 minus 1, there's still an x left. Negative 12 divided by 2 is negative 6. And I have an x, and I take 1 away. I don't have any x left for that term. So the idea of factoring with a greatest common factor is we're making things a little simpler. We're making the variables and the exponents a little bit smaller. But it's not always going to be something just in common that we can take out. Sometimes there isn't going to be anything in common. So what happens if there's nothing in common? I mean, x squared, 5x, and 4, that doesn't have x. Nothing really divides into any of them. So how do I do this? Okay, so here is the best advice I can give on these. When I'm looking at these, we're looking for 2 numbers that multiply to get the number on the end and add to get the number in the middle. The same 2 numbers. And so I'm going to make 2 sets of parentheses. I'm going to start each one with an x. And then I'm going to start looking for clues to help me with my signs. Now this one's not real hard because everything in the problem is plus. So I know these are going to be plus. So here's what I got to figure out. What multiplies to 4, but the same 2 numbers add up to 5? Which one of those 2 pairs adds up to 5? Okay, 4 and 1. That's what I'm looking for. So that can be one of those things that you can kind of look at. If the chart, I don't think is going to be as helpful on that one, because I think we can figure out what multiplies to get to 4, but when we get to some of the bigger ones, I think it is going to help. So this next one for sure, I think we're going to be able to get some assistance on this. So, okay, start with my x's. I would keep labeling my multiply and add numbers for right now. This time we're going to have a little more work to do. Okay. If 2 numbers multiply to a negative, what do I know about the signs of the 2 numbers? Do 2 positives make a negative? No. Do 2 negatives make a negative if I'm multiplying? No. So it's got to be one of each, because if I think about it, okay, when I'm looking at my add numbers, positive times positive, I just said multiply numbers and I said add. What am I doing? Let's try that again. Multiply Positive and positive make positive. You're like, I knew that already. Negative and negative make positive. Only positive and negative can make negative. So if I see here that my multiply number is negative, I know those are the two signs I'm going to be using. So now I can either, if I like, I can go to a calculator, I can go to my chart. I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply to 40 that are 3 apart from each other. So I kind of start peeking around on here, and I'm like, all right, so there's 40, so 10 and 4, but 10 and 4 aren't 3 apart from each other, so that didn't really help me. 40. 8 and 5. Ooh, wait a minute. 8 and 5, they're 3 apart, right? Right? Okay. So if I'm going to do 8 and 5, now I got to pay attention to my add number. I want it to add up to negative 3. So the bigger number has to be negative. So same two numbers multiply to the number on the end, but the exact two same numbers add up to the number in the middle. So signs are going to be important. But that middle sign will always tell you which number's bigger. And this is going to be one of those topics that, yeah, we're probably going to spend up to break doing this, because it is a little bit on the trickier side. So, okay, let's look at our clues. Multiplies to a positive. Okay, so they're either both positive or they're both negative. That sign will tell me they're both negative. Like, all right. Multiplies to 12 and adds to 8. Now, some of you, when I just said that, might be like, wait a minute. You just said on the last problem that this was this far apart. Now you're saying add them together. What the heck? What's the difference? If the signs are the same, plus plus or minus minus, you're adding the two numbers to multiply, you're adding them together to get the number in the middle. If they're different signs, one's positive and one's negative, it's almost like you're subtracting instead, or you're just adding with a negative. You know, that's how far apart they are. That's one of the things we're going to kind of be playing with here. And if you're not sure sometime if an answer is right, you can always, I'll tell people this, you can always test your middle two terms, kind of doing this FOIL thing. And if those two add up to the number in the middle, you're good. Negative 8 plus 5 is negative 3. Positive 4 and positive 1 is positive 5. So there's lots of ways to even double check and make sure you're good. But back to the one at hand. Multiplies to 12. I'm going to be your chart on this one. We could look this up on the chart, but I'll just kind of... So there's my numbers that multiply to 12. Which pair adds up to 8? Those two. And we already know the signs. So I got negative 2x. And I've got negative 6x. And they add up to my middle number. That's your way to check on these. You're going to have, like it says here, you're going to have a lot of like guess and check and do it again. And so definitely you'll want a pencil available, because we're not going to be perfect every time on this. And that's okay. So the last little piece of this today, like I said, this gets a couple days worth. It's worth it. So now, I'm going to teach this one way. That could be dangerous, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I think it's worth doing. Because it's going to make them all like these. So here's how this works. Whatever number's in front, that 2, we're going to slide it down to the end. And when I say slide, bless you, we're going to multiply that number down to the end. So that 2 So we're doing 2 times 3. So that makes it 6. Now there's no number in front of x squared. That's a good thing for us. Because now we can do it like we just did this last group. So I go looking for my clues. Everything's positive. All right. So what multiplies to 6? Two numbers multiply to 6 and adds up to 7. 1 and 6. But here's the kicker. We're not done with this one. Because when we multiplied that over before, this little thing I'm doing to you is called slide and divide. The multiply is the slide. That number that you put in the box here, we're going to divide it out at the end. So if it goes in nice, 6 divided by 2 is 3, we just simplify what we've got. If you try to simplify it and you're still getting a decimal or a fraction, that's okay. We just have to take that number and slide it back in front of your x. So it goes back to the front. And if I do my checking, 1x and 6x is 7x. I'm still getting my number in the middle. So there's one extra step in there if there's a number in front that we're going to do to deal with these. So let's kind of keep playing here. So slide that first number down to the end. We're going to multiply. I'm going to try and bust out the chart on this one. So I look and I'm like, all right, I got to figure out my signs. Thank you. My multiply number is positive. Okay. So either both signs are positive or both signs are negative. Middle sign tells me. So my job, two numbers multiply to 30, but are going to add up to 17. All right, let's see here. Let's go looking for 30s. 30s. 5 and 6, that does not add up to 17. 10 and 3 does not add up to 17. Ooh, wait a minute. 15 and 2. 15 and 2 add up to 17. I have some people also that'll do this sometimes. They're like, Hardy, I don't like that chart. Can I just grab my calculator and start dividing numbers into 30 and just keep writing down the pairs that I get until I find the pair that I want? And that works too. If you're quicker with your fingers than you are looking at a chart, that's an A-okay thing. So here, there's my 3. Divide by 3. If it goes in nice, great. If you punch it in and you get a decimal, back to the front. Back to the front we go. You mean like if I have like the 3x minus 2 here and the x minus 5 here? Not a bit of difference. Nope. Positive and negative, and that the numbers, like I couldn't have like 2 here and 5 here. That'd cause a problem. But yeah, if you have the same sets of parentheses that are just moved around, that's okay. Okay, one more, because this last one has a twist. You're like, dang, dude, it's the first day. Why are we getting twists? So we'll multiply that 8 down. All right. We'll play the calculator game this time. My multiply number is negative. If my multiply number is negative, those are my signs. So I got a plus and a minus here. Okay. So 72. Hardy is going to be your built-in calculator here. I always start dividing by little numbers and work my way up. So if I'm doing 72 and I start dividing, I'm going to get me a whole heaping lot of pairs of numbers that will multiply to 72. Never knew so many numbers could multiply to 72. So what am I doing? The signs are different. So which pair here can I subtract, or are they 6 apart from each other? 6 and 12 are 6 apart from each other. And that is always the sign of the bigger number. So 12 is bigger, 12 gets the negative. But as we have learned, we are not quite done yet. Don't be content here. This 8 we're going to divide in. And I am going to go grab a calculator because this is what can screw people up with this. Like, Purdy, they're both decimals. 8 doesn't go evenly into that. So what are we doing? We just slide it back to the front. Oh, not quite. Because if we did, we're going to end up with 8 and 8 at the beginning, and that doesn't multiply to 8. That wouldn't work. So make a little note to self here. Hopefully, if I can find a pen that's going to work, we're going to try this one. Oh, this could be fun. All right. We need to reduce our fractions when we do this. So here's what I mean. Let me brighten this up a little. So if I do 6 divided by 8, I get a decimal. If I do math enter, it goes down to 3/4. If I do negative 12 divided by 8, decimal, math enter, I get negative 3/2. That's the one thing you've got to remember with it. Now, they're still fractions. They still didn't turn out easy peasy. But by doing that, positive 6x, negative 12x. If I wouldn't have reduced those fractions first, when I did that little trick to see if the middle number worked, it wouldn't have worked. You've been like, dang, I did all the right work. And you just got to make sure the fractions get reduced. Okay? I'm not going to worry about difference of squares today. That's going a little too far. So, this is one of those things that if you ignore it and just go, yep, I'm going into La La Land, it is Friday afternoon, don't care, it is going to come get you. Because factoring basically won't go away for the rest of the year. It's going to be in a bunch of different things that we do. So sooner or later, we just got to face up to it and just kind of roll with it. So, all right, break in the new practice packet. You're going to be like, Hardy, the bottom looks normal. I can see what we're up to down there. But wait a minute. What's this crap going on up top? What are you trying to do here? I'm trying to get you used to watching for these patterns that we're doing. So here's the thing. When we're doing these, the pattern... We must have done good this week. So the two numbers on the side are going to multiply to the number on top, and the same two numbers are going to add to the number on the bottom. So for instance, if I was looking at number 4, I'm like, wait, multiply and add. I know one of the numbers is 4. So I either got to think, what number plus 4 is 9, or what number plus times 4 is 20? It's the same number. Okay, it's 5. Or if I look, let's see here. Is that a negative? Yes, it is. Okay. So if I look at two numbers, they multiply to positive 12. It means they're the same sign. Because again, positive and positive is positive, and so is negative and negative. But that says negative. So they're both negative. What multiplies to 12? That also adds up to 7. If you're not sure, the chart's there. The calculator's there. And it can kind of... So that's just to have you think about the pattern. It's not really doing the actual factoring. It's just kind of thinking it through. And to save you a little bit of time and effort, I will give you the warning instead of just saying, I'm going to let them do it. And no, I'm not telling you to do them all. Do like odds or evens. It doesn't matter which. I'm going to come down to the bottom. I tried to give a clue here, but a lot of times people don't see it. Factor what's in common first, then do diamonds. In other words, there's going to be a number that divides into all three of these on all of these problems on the bottom. And so if I divide that out first, that's going to make my factoring that much easier because now I don't have to do that big slide and divide thing. Because this 2 is out of the way, all I have to do is check here on my signs. Everything is positive. So let's see. Multiplies to 24, adds to 14. 24. 6 and 4 does not add to 14. 3 and 8, I'm getting closer. Oh, there's one. 12 and 2. Yes, there we go. 12 and 2 get me to there. Then I just tuck the 2 back in front. You don't have to divide it. You don't have to slide it. Nothing fancy. I'm trying to not make this complicated day one. You're only going to be doing the add and multiplies here at the first part. You're not going to have to do the slide and divide yet. So please, I beg of you. Odds or evens, I don't care which. I don't care which. But just don't do none of the above. None of the above is not going to turn out well. I'm just saying. Yeah. Okie dokie.